Most gardeners plant garlic the same weekend they decide to plant garlic. They walk out to a bed that grew tomatoes or peppers all summer. They turn the soil that morning and push the cloves in before it even settles. It feels efficient. It feels like common sense. And a good portion of those plantings come up small and disappointing by harvest time. I have watched this exact pattern for years, across more gardens than I can count. The bulb looks fine going into the ground. The problem shows up 7 or 8 months later, when you pull a garlic head the size of a golf ball instead of a fist, and you have no idea what went wrong, because everything looked normal in the fall. Here is the first thing that actually matters, and it has nothing to do with the clove itself. It is timing the soil, not timing your schedule. If you turned that soil this morning and you are planting this afternoon, stop. Freshly worked ground is loose and full of air pockets. Garlic cloves planted into it sink deeper than you intended as the soil settles around them over the following weeks, and a clove buried too deep struggles to push a healthy shoot up before the ground freezes. The fix is simple. Prepare the bed at least 4 weeks before you plan to plant. Then let it rest, undisturbed. The soil needs that time to settle on its own. The second thing to check is what grew in that spot before. If your last crop was onions, leeks, shallots, or garlic itself, that bed is not ready, no matter how good it looks on the surface. Alliums pull the same nutrients out of the soil, and more importantly, they leave behind the pests and pathogens that specifically target alliums. Onion maggot larvae and certain soil fungi persist in the ground for a full season after the crop is gone, waiting for the next allium planting to show up. If that is genuinely the only bed you have, do not skip garlic this year. Instead, work in a full wheelbarrow of finished compost per square meter and turn it in thoroughly before the soil rests. It will not fully reset the bed, but it meaningfully dilutes the problem. If you are working with a genuinely small plot and there is nowhere else to rotate to, lean on soil recovery instead of rotation. Seeding a fast cover crop and turning it under, working in extra finished compost, and introducing a beneficial soil fungus like trichoderma all help suppress the same pathogens a proper rotation would have avoided in the first place. It will not fully replace rotating the bed, but it closes most of the gap. Heavy feeders like potatoes, carrots, and beets create a different issue. They pull hard on the same upper soil layer garlic depends on, and that layer does not bounce back on its own in a few weeks. Even a solid dose of fertilizer right before planting cannot fully replace what a season of root crops stripped out, because rebuilding organic matter and microbial life takes longer than rebuilding a nutrient number on paper. A low-lying bed fails a completely different way. Instead of small bulbs, you get rot. Garlic sitting where water pools after rain or snowmelt softens and blackens from the base up, usually discovered only once you dig the first bulb in early summer. The fix here is simple, and it is all about elevation. Build the row into a raised mound 6 to 8 inches above the surrounding soil, roughly 15 to 20 centimeters, before you plant, and that alone solves most of the problem. Acidic soil is quieter, but just as damaging. Garlic simply will not size up properly once the pH drops much below neutral, even with perfect drainage and feeding. A basic soil test tells you where you stand, and if it comes back acidic, work in wood ash or agricultural lime while you are already preparing the bed, well ahead of planting. Once the site itself is right, here is what actually gives garlic a strong start. Squash, cucumbers, and zucchini leave soil loose and only mildly depleted the following season, which is close to ideal. Peas and beans do even better, since legumes fix nitrogen into the soil as they grow, rather than pulling it out. A cover crop like mustard or clover works even better. Seed it early and turn it under to break it down into organic matter, which builds soil structure and actively fights off allium pathogens. With the right spot chosen, the actual bed prep takes 4 straightforward steps, done about a month out from planting. Clear every scrap of old plant debris, stray roots, and weeds first, since leftover material is exactly where fungal spores and overwintering pests survive. Turn the soil 1 full spade deep next, and if it is heavy or clay-based, work in sand or peat to open up drainage. Then feed it. 5 to 10 kilograms of finished compost per square meter, roughly 10 to 20 pounds, plus a light dose of potassium sulfate for root strength and superphosphate to push bulb development specifically, not just leaf growth. Water it in lightly after that, just enough to settle everything, never to the point of standing water. Then leave it alone. 4 weeks of rest lets the soil finish settling and lets those nutrients distribute evenly through the root zone, so the cloves land in ground that is ready, rather than ground that is still adjusting. Planting time itself comes down to soil temperature, not the calendar. Wait until the ground cools to somewhere between 50 and 54 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. Garlic needs enough time before hard frost to grow roots without pushing up green top growth, and that temperature window gets the timing right, regardless of what the date on the calendar says. A few details make a real difference once the cloves go in the ground. Leave the papery skin on each clove instead of peeling it, since that skin is the clove's actual defense against rot and disease in the soil, and a peeled clove is measurably more vulnerable through the winter. Skip watering after planting entirely. Fall rainfall is normally enough, and extra water on top of it just raises the risk of the rot problem the raised bed was meant to prevent in the first place. Once the first hard frost hits, mulch the row with about 2 inches of straw or shredded leaves, roughly 5 centimeters, to buffer the coldest swings. Then pull that mulch back in early spring so the soil can warm up and wake the cloves on schedule. Garlic also earns its place as a companion, not just a crop on its own. Planted along the edge of a strawberry bed or between rows of tomatoes, it releases natural compounds that help keep common pests away from both plants, which makes it worth tucking a row in even outside the main garlic bed. One planting mismatch causes more disappointment than almost anything else in this whole process, and it has nothing to do with soil at all. Hardneck garlic needs that stretch of cold weeks to trigger proper bulb formation. Skip the cold by planting a hardneck variety in spring instead of fall, and you get a plant that grows normally above ground, but never actually divides into the distinct cloves people expect, since it never got the trigger it needed. Softneck varieties run the opposite risk. Plant a softneck type in fall in a genuinely harsh winter climate, and it can struggle to survive cold spells a hardneck variety would shrug off without issue. Match the type to the season it actually needs, and this entire failure mode disappears. If you are staring at last year's undersized harvest and wondering whether the clove itself was the problem, it almost never was. Pull one of those small bulbs apart and look at the base. A hard, woody core running straight up the center means you planted hardneck garlic. That core is the dried remnant of the flower stalk the plant would have sent up in summer if you had let it. Press a thumb against the top of an unopened bulb, and that core is easy to feel even before you cut into it. No core at all, just layers of soft leaf tissue wrapped around each other, means softneck, the type that skips the flower stalk and relies on outer leaf layers instead. That distinction tells you whether spring planting timing or winter hardiness was the actual issue, not the bulb size itself. Prepare that bed a month ahead, match the soil and the site to what garlic actually needs, and the size difference in next year's harvest will be obvious the moment you pull the first bulb. What are you planting your garlic after this year? Drop it in the comments. And if this saved you from repeating last season's mistake, subscribe for more ways to get a strong